It's been nearly 24 hours and not a peep from Trump on Truth Social. He's not talking to reporters, nothing. He is in full-blown panic mode over this email dump of the Epstein estate, and it is damning, damning stuff. And now we are learning that the vote is going to happen next week to release the full Epstein files, and there are at least 100 Republicans that have said they are going to vote yes to release the files. This is huge because that is enough to get the supermajority in the House to make it veto proof. Now you need a supermajority in the Senate also when it goes to them. But guys, this is major. The shift is happening and the Republicans know how bad this is now and are shifting away from Trump. He's not just a lame duck president. He is completely ineffective, and anyone else in their right mind right now would be resigning. But it's Trump, and he's not going to do that. So we'll see how things move going forward. But even the Justice Department today is admitting that these emails undermined Todd Blanche's conversation, his interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. So now the question is, what are they going to do with her? Is she going to get to keep her service dog? Is she going to stay in this minimum security prison? Or are they going to be forced to have to move her where she really should be, where the rest of the people who committed her crimes should be? Let me know what you guys think about all this. Comment, like, share, spread the word, follow, subscribe, and I'll see you back here for the 411.
Well, it's official. This country does not prosecute men for assaulting women and girls. Matt Gaetz, Trump's first pick for Attorney General, is back in the news today. The New York Times is reporting that he slept with a 17-year-old girl who was a junior in high school in Florida for money. Documents confirmed he paid her $400. This girl was saving up money to get braces. She was working at McDonald's and in and out of homeless shelters. And a bipartisan House Ethics Committee determined that there was enough evidence to prove all of this. Yet nothing's ever happened to him because this country doesn't care what happens to women and girls. They don't prosecute these men. And yet he was a favorite of the President of the United States. This is a man who was preying on a young girl who was in and out of homeless shelters. Do you have any idea how depraved you have to be to do something like that, to take advantage of an individual like that? Most people would want to help her, not exploit her and use her and traumatize her. But that is exactly who this administration is and who they surround themselves with.
Trump is either going to have some sort of medical event or there is going to be some huge distraction orchestrated. Because with all of the information that came out yesterday, the Trump administration is literally panicking. Now, on top of absolutely everything else that came out yesterday, we find out that Jeffrey Epstein and Trump spent Thanksgiving together in 2017 while Trump was president. This was confirmed by the newly released emails, which contained a guest list for Epstein's Thanksgiving Day crew. So this actually irrefutably proves that Trump has been lying about his relationship to Epstein, because Trump has been claiming that he banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago decades ago. Now we have multiple instances that show that that's absolutely not the case. But wait, it gets worse. Here's a direct quote from Epstein in one of these emails. "I have met some very bad people. None as bad as Trump. Not one decent cell in his body." If a sociopath is saying that about Trump, what exactly does that mean about who Trump is as a person? I have to say, for most of us, this is no surprise whatsoever, and we can see this. We can see this in all of his incredibly cruel and heinous actions. But I do not know how MAGA is going to possibly spin all of this. I don't think they can.
At this point, the only way the Republican Party is going to survive the Epstein scandal is if Trump gets all his cult followers to argue that it's okay for grown men to have sex with teenage girls. These types of arguments are already starting to pop up in comment sections and live streams, and I guarantee you Republicans are going to go after the statutory age of consent. I don't know what mechanisms are available for them to try that on the federal level, but I guarantee you they're at least going to try to change the narrative around whether or not it's socially and legally acceptable for a 40-year-old or 50-year-old or 60-year-old or 70-year-old man to have sex with a 15, 16, or 17-year-old girl. I rarely ever talk about Dean because I don't watch his content, but I just caught a clip of some asshat in his live stream trying to ask him the question, why do you think it's wrong for kids to be... I think I might have taken it differently than most people in the comment section, because everyone that was there watching this conversation happen is like, if you have to be told why it's wrong, then you're the problem. Well, obviously, yes. But I think that person was trying to do more. I think that particular co-host that was asking that deplorable question was trying to pull a Charlie Kirk on Dean, right? Really felt like that classic tactic of prove me wrong, XYZ. It felt like what he was doing was trying to get Dean to say, this is why that is wrong, so that he can pick that statement apart and try to explain to Dean or argue why 15, 16, and 17-year-old girls are not in fact children, or why they have the ability to make decisions about this, that, or the other without, the government stepping in and blah, blah, blah. Whatever the case may be, you could see it coming from a mile away. And this is the playbook that they're going to start to use, because they don't have any other options. When all of the evidence is laid out on the table and you can no longer deny that Hanks is diddling little girls, then they're just going to say, well, it's not wrong to diddle little girls. Or, just generally using the argument that teenage girls aren't kids. If you didn't ever think we were going to get here, we are here now. We're here now. And they've reached a new low. Of course, we always knew that you could present any evidence to them and they still would either not believe it or find some reason to excuse it. So this isn't news to anyone, but I just think it's hilarious how predictable they are.
This is the biggest political scandal in modern presidential history. Full stop. Right now, there's a flood of headlines about Jeffrey Epstein. So give me 2 minutes to break down exactly what we have, what we don't have, and where we go from here, because a lot of creators are getting this wrong. Yesterday, we received a bombshell batch of new emails where Epstein wrote that Trump, quote, knew about the girls, and that he spent hours with one of Epstein's victims at Epstein's house. But it's important to know that these are not the Epstein files. These specific emails were released by House Democrats, but they're part of a tranche of 20,000 plus pages of documents that were released from Epstein's estate. They were actually subpoenaed by House Republicans. And you're probably asking, why would Republicans release documents that could be damaging to Trump? It's because it's part of a strategy by Mike Johnson and House Republicans to avoid releasing the actual files from the Department of Justice. They believe, because they're not very smart, that by releasing the estate documents, they can say, see, we've already released it all, and argue that releasing the DOJ files would expose the victims. Total bullshit. This strategy was always going to fail, but it's gone even worse than they expected, because with what we already have, it's clear that 1, Trump and Epstein were closer friends than we knew. 2, Trump knew about Epstein's crimes, despite his denials. And 3, and probably most importantly, that Epstein believed that this was leverage that he had on Trump. So how do we get our hands on the actual Epstein files? Well, on the same day that these emails dropped, Adelita Grijalva was sworn in, providing the final signature needed to force a vote on releasing the files. And that's a done deal. There will be a vote in the House, and it's expected to pass by a landslide. But don't pop the champagne yet, because after the House passes it, it goes to the Senate, which may not even schedule a vote on it. And even if it passes there, it lands on Trump's desk, where he could veto it. But here's the thing. If the Senate tries to bury this for Trump, it will blow up in their faces. It could even lead to Republicans losing their Senate majority. And if Trump is forced to veto, it's basically an admission of guilt. It may not lead to him resigning or being sent to prison, but it will break the glass around him. It will cement him as a scandal-ridden lame duck. And the institutions caving to him will have to think twice. So here's what you can do. After this passes the House, we need to flood the Senate phones with calls. Every Republican senator should be overwhelmed by calls to release these files. And they need to fear for their political lives. The number for Congress's switchboard is on the screen. Then you can share this video to spread the word, and follow me to stay in the loop.
Do you know how you can tell when Donald Trump is terrified? He realizes he's cornered and there's no way out. It's when Donald Trump becomes tight-lipped. Now, I know that sounds crazy. That motherfucker won't shut up. Even if people are coming after him, he'll double, triple, quadruple down. He'll be yapping all the way. But we got a different situation right now. The Epstein emails came out yesterday, and it is a shitstorm. People in the White House are just fucking spinning around. Donald Trump goes to sign off on the continuing resolution. The press start asking questions, and they ask him about the Epstein emails. Does he push back? Does he distract? Does he divert? Does he claim it's somebody else's fault? No. Says nothing. He says absolutely nothing. The man who thinks he can talk himself out of anything said nothing. And then on True Social all night, where he would stay up late and rant and do all that crazy shit, not one thing. Not one thing about the Epstein emails. And then today he's in a meeting for an executive order. Melania's with him. He's asked about the Epstein emails again, refuses to answer. This is something we've never seen before with Donald Trump. He always has the last word. He always has some bullshit to say, but he has nothing to say right now. He is a narcissist that's been cornered. All of his tricks aren't working, and he doesn't know what to fucking do. It could get ugly henceforth, or he could just fade away. I don't know what's going to happen. But make no mistake, Donald Trump is terrified, he's cornered, and he understands there's no way out. And that is the absolute worst moment in time for any fucking narcissist.
Of all the bombshells that dropped yesterday, one of the more shocking ones, in my opinion, was the fact that Donald Trump, President of the United States of America, a billionaire in his own right, arguably the most powerful man in the world, unfortunately, is so terrified of the Epstein files being released that he called Lauren Boebert, who is a member of Congress from Colorado and a woman, into the Situation Room to try and get her to rescind her signature on the discharge petition to release the Epstein files. Just sit with that for a second, because it's truly extraordinary. And there is no way on earth that someone who is innocent is going to go to that length to prevent this information from being released. And according to what I read this morning, Lauren Boebert has actually become more convinced that there is a cover-up in play because of the pressure being applied to her by Donald Trump. So I guess it's backfired on him. And while I would never vote or like even any of the 3 women who have signed the discharge petition from the Republican Party, I do think it is important to acknowledge that they have stood firm against tremendous, monumental pressure from their president and their party to backtrack on it, and they have all stood firm. Doesn't mean we like them, but we do acknowledge that they have stood firm.
The Senate forced the House to come back into session. So that's a really big deal, because Johnson, of course, has sent everybody home. They haven't been doing any work at all because they were doing Trump's bidding. And what the Senate said was, get your butts back into those chairs. You need to come back and do some work. And the first thing you're going to have to do is take on our bill, because the way it works is the Senate and the House can pass each other's bills, but generally they write their own bills, and then either the other house passes, like the House can pass a Senate bill or the Senate can pass a House bill, or they go to conference committee. In this case, that probably won't happen. The House will either accept it or they won't. And they probably will. But that forces the House to come back into session. And that's, I think, why you saw Johnson really being quite blindsided, is because he thought he was operating on what Donald Trump wanted to do. And he seemed to think that the Senate was going to do the same thing. And the Senate said, no, we're going to do this our own way. So let me walk you through the House next, but let me finish with the Senate. So what happened was the Democrats did not get what they were demanding, the one thing that they had left on the table, which was the extension of the premium tax credits, without which more than 4 million Americans, according to the people who study this stuff, the statistics I use tend to come from KFF, which is a nonprofit organization that looks into healthcare stuff. You can find them online. Look it up yourself. They're solid. Without which more than 4 million people will lose their health care, and the health care premiums for millions of others are going to go through the roof, because as people drop out of the health pools, the people left in them are not as healthy, and so the risk goes up, and the stuff gets way more expensive. Meaning way more expensive. This is not a small deal. And those premiums come due at the end of December, or maybe it's December 15th, but come up in December. And this is a true crisis. So in a way, there was a crisis between the damage being done to the country itself and the damage being done to the people who wanted the extension of those premium tax credits, which are slated to expire in December. And the Republicans simply weren't budging on that. They weren't moving on that. But here's a wrinkle in that. So Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who's this Republican of South Dakota, agreed that the Democrats could bring a measure to the floor of the Senate. I'm seeing a lot of people going, well, Johnson's never going to do that. That was never part of the deal. This is a Senate deal that they will hold a vote on. And is it going to pass? Well, I'm not going to predict that future, because here's a wrinkle in that. 78% of Americans want those extended. And Donald Trump doesn't, and there are a lot of Republicans who absolutely don't want it because that will help the Affordable Care Act that they're trying to get rid of. But I would be surprised if it's a straight Republican vote against it, because a lot of people don't want to go back to their constituents and say, yeah, I voted against your health care. It's one thing to sort of say, well, I'm not going to deal with the Democrats. It's another thing to say, I voted no on a clean bill to extend your health care, because there's a lot of pressure for that. So that's what the Democrats got. And a lot of you asked me, was it only these 8 people? Were there more people? I don't know. I'm not party to those discussions, but I would be very surprised if there weren't more Democrats who were very unhappy about how badly their constituents were getting hurt, from the simple reason that all the people who voted with the Republicans are not in any kind of electoral danger anytime soon. And that seems pretty damn random if it happened by accident. So it is my guess that there were more people who thought this was a good idea, but didn't want to take the hit for doing so. And before I go on to the House, let me go into that because I think there are 2 things that
Trump wants total transparency on the Epstein files, which is why he's going scorched earth to stop them from coming out. This is just another day. Today, after an epic 54-day recess, the House of Representatives finally went back to work, just in time for Thanksgiving break. Seriously, is anyone ever at the Capitol building? Because money's tight these days. Maybe they can start renting it out for bar mitzvahs or something. But the government has been shut down for nearly 2 months. We've got a midterm election just around the corner. I'm sure House Republicans were anxious to get back to pushing forward their agenda while they've still got the political clout.
House Democrats just released this morning never-before-seen emails that they say are from the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Those emails from 2011 to 2019 appear to reference his relationship with President Trump before he took office.
Sometimes we get to ease back into work after a long vacation. Sometimes we have to answer for our boss's ties to a pedophile the minute we walk in the door. Adulting, am I right? Seriously, you've got to feel for House Republicans. The same day they get back to their office, they have to barricade themselves inside of it. Because no Republican wants to answer for the damning emails that House Democrats made public this morning.
In one email from 2019, Epstein wrote to journalist Michael Wolff that Trump, quote, knew about the girls. In another exchange, Epstein wrote that the president, quote, spent hours at his house with a person who House Democrats say is one of Epstein's alleged victims.
Okay, so according to the man himself, Trump both knew about Epstein's victims and participated in victimizing them. But since when is Jeffrey Epstein the most credible guy? And come on, Trump behaving creepy around an underage girl? What would that even look like? But look, these are serious allegations, and they certainly complicate the narrative that Republicans were pushing just weeks ago.
Suddenly now, they somehow convince themselves that the Epstein files will be damaging to President Trump and Republicans in some way that they've imagined, and so they feign outrage.
There is truly no lazier way for Mike Johnson to defend his party against this accusation than by restating it in a sarcastic voice with some air quotes thrown in. Democrats believe that the Epstein files will be damaging to President Trump and Republicans. Right. And I plan to stick my penis in the pumpkin pie my wife is making for Thanksgiving because my son monitors my porn so I have no other sexual outlet. But these new emails are just the tip of the Epstein iceberg. With Congress back in session and Arizona Representative Adelita Grijalva finally sworn in after 2 months in limbo, Democrats have advanced their discharge petition to force a vote on the full release of the DOJ's Epstein files. And with so much speculation about how this information could implicate Trump, the man deserves a chance to defend himself. But he'd actually rather that his lackeys do it.
This is truly a manufactured hoax by the Democrat Party. For now, they're talking about it all of a sudden because President Trump is in the Oval Office. But when Joe Biden was sitting in there, the Democrats never brought this up. This wasn't an issue that they cared about because they actually don't care about the victims in these cases. They care about trying to score political points against President Trump, as we have, of course, seen with this government shutdown.
I think it's all been explained. I think this is a massive distraction by the Democrats while we're trying to get the government reopened and covered for their mistakes.
This is a hoax, a distraction, and who can spot one of those better than Donald J. Trump himself. This is the guy who invited all of Bill Clinton's accusers to his debate with Hillary just to troll her. The guy who had a photographer edit pictures of his first inauguration to make his crowd seem bigger. The guy who launched his political career by claiming Barack Obama faked his birth certificate. If hoaxes and distractions were a martial art, Trump would be Jackie Chan. But you know what? I'm going to give Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt. I mean, it's not like he spent all day calling Lauren Boebert, calling Nancy Mace, working every angle to try and get them to remove their names from the discharge petition.
The New York Times is reporting that he's calling Lauren Boebert. He's calling Nancy Mace, who is running for governor in South Carolina, and would need his endorsement to clear in the primary. But he is working every angle he can to try to get them to remove their names from the discharge petition so that the bill won't come to the floor.
Let me get this straight. Trump wants us to believe there's absolutely nothing that implicates him in the Epstein files, and he spent all day calling Lauren Boebert, one of the only Republicans calling for the files release. All due respect, Donald, quit jerking us around. We're not Lauren Boebert's Beetlejuice date. Still, the Trump administration insists that if they had something to hide, they'd be hiding it.
Given your interest in transparency, Caroline, why are White House officials then meeting with Representative Boebert in an effort to try and get her to not sign this petition calling for the release of the files?
Doesn't it show transparency that members of the Trump administration are willing to brief members of Congress whenever they please? Doesn't that show our level of transparency? Doesn't that show the level of transparency when we are willing to sit down with members of Congress and address their concerns? That's a defining factor of transparency.
You are so right, and I'm sorry for doubting your commitment to transparency for even a second. And I'm sorry, what happened in that meeting?
I'm not going to detail conversations that took place in the Situation Room, in the press briefing room.
Because transparency. This is honestly crazy making. There is no point in trying to deconstruct their logic because there is no logic to deconstruct. The Trump administration is claiming they've got nothing to hide because they're being open about having meetings to bury the truth. It's like telling your wife, cheating on you? With what time? I'm too busy sneaking around in hotel rooms with random side pieces. Which, let's be real, is probably something Trump has said to Melania. By the way, while the Trump administration touts its firm belief in transparency, because remember, Trump has nothing to hide, what happens in the House if it does push forward with this bill to release the Epstein files?
But even if it does pass the House, this bill faces a very uncertain prospect, very dubious prospects. In fact, the Senate Republican leaders have shown no interest in taking this bill up. It's unlikely to get 60 votes there. And of course, Donald Trump would have to sign it into law, which he has made very clear how opposed he is to this bill.
Wow. So unless there is a veto-proof majority in Congress to override Trump's veto, none of this actually matters. That's gotta feel strange for Republicans to hear. They've ceded all their power to one person, and suddenly, one person has all the power. The point is, instead of trying to decode the Trump administration's absurd logic, let's look at the facts as we actually know them. Donald Trump got elected by promising to look out for working class people. He said he would make housing more affordable, curb inflation, bring down healthcare costs, make America good, nay, great again. And not only has he not done any of that, not only has he done nothing to address these very real problems, he shut down the government. And while everything he promised to fix was getting worse, while 42 million Americans went hungry, he threw a great Gatsby party. He went golfing. For 2 months, he couldn't find an hour to meet with Democratic leadership to help end the shutdown. But the same day that the discharge petition hangs in the balance on something that would incriminate him, then boom, within minutes, he's got Lauren Boebert in the Situation Room. When something is important to him, he gets it done, and he gets it done fast, which is to say, when Americans go without health care and food assistance, when costs surge, when inflation skyrockets, when manufacturing stalls, when job growth is flat, that's not happening in spite of his hard work. He just doesn't care enough to fix it. Don't listen to what he says, just watch what he does, because his actions constantly expose what his actual priorities are. After all,
that's a defining factor of transparency.
Exactly.